I'm at LUT1 and this is my LUT presentation of my LAT paper. Basically what I did in my paper was I looked at historical keystones within the development of computers, which led to the atmosphere and the environment which we today have with the internet and interconnectivity within our social communication, the way we work, and the way we entertain ourselves, all throughout computers. There were major developments which led to this. First off, ARPANET, back in the 1960s, the Defense Department idea to begin networking computers. ARPANET, this is a 1970s version of what it would have looked like. This is basically was the very first time that computers were connected. You know, the computers that were connected aren't like the personal computers that we're used to today. These were the first types of computers, which the first completely electronic computer was developed by the military back around the 1950s or so. And it was mainly for artillery trajectory calculations. ARPANET in the early 1990s was opened up to commercial traffic, which is where we now get what we understand today as the internet. These right here are the commercial backbones of four prominent data carriers: AT&T, Verizon, QS, what I would call it, some people call it Quest, and Level 3. Anyhow, as you can see, though, oddly, the map for ARPANET in the 1970s really kind of also coincides pretty heavily with today's backbone, obviously with Chicago and Atlanta being the predominant Midwest hubs, and Dallas and Denver. Not much changed. Another major component would be the personal computer. The 1980s Commodore 64 was and still is, best-selling computer model ever developed. Part of its success is it was youth-focused, and it also had more games and applications, peripherals, for instance, for people to enjoy the content of it. Another early computer would be the Apple II, which was not as successful, though. The price point for this computer was unheard of at the time, and ran companies like IBM and Texas Instruments out of the personal computer industry back in the 1980s. What those two things have done is they've led to the modern world in which we trust computers massively at this point now. This is a picture of a Qantas airline in an A330 cockpit. Qantas had a flight that made a lot of news in which a computer incorrectly thought that the plane was crashing. Well, I'm sorry, the computer incorrectly thought that the plane was going to stall because it was at such a high pitch, so it ordered the plane to dive, when really the plane was level, so it ordered the plane to really dive. The computer also shut off the pilot's controls because it thought that it knew it was best. Obviously, that's an odd thing that computers have developed into. Also, another way would be within pharmacies. How we get prescription medication now. It's now cross-referenced, for instance, against other prescription medication that we've gotten to make sure there's no drug interactions. A drawback to that, though, would be, for instance, if we got one prescription at Rite Aid and another prescription at Walgreens, those aren't going to necessarily be interconnected. So completely relying upon the computers to do what we should do can be bad. Social networking. This is an application on Facebook which it tries to show you how you know different people, which is kind of sad that you need an application to let you know how you know people, but that's the way we communicate nowadays. And so it's just the interconnectivity and the way that we share information within our family and friends. That is basically my presentation. I have a question which I recorded at a previous version of this, which I'll be adding in. Thanks.
what kind of content was available on networks previous to Congress granting public access to ARPANET, like on AOL or CompuServe?
Basically, the only content that would have been available on those networks would have been whatever specifically on that network itself. Previous to having access to ARPANET, if you signed on to AOL, the only thing that you got was AOL. There was no way to communicate with anybody who was not on AOL. If you dialed into your work network, there was no Google. There was no anything other than your work network. All you had was what was on that specific provider. That's what ARPANET changed.